The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in.
Welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of snot because I'm sick.
Three fans, you say? You said 3 fans?
Okay, well, I'm so used to saying it. So Kayla's not on this one again because, I don't know, she's in Scotland exploring castles and having a fairy tale time in school in Scotland, and she was not able to see the movie. I guess Scotland doesn't believe in movie theaters or something. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand any of that because Scotland is in the 21st century, but fair enough. She couldn't see it. Not yet. She didn't want to see it either. I'll just put it out there. Her opinion, to summarize her opinion of this movie, I imagine it would be something like that. So if you guys want to hear more, you should definitely hit her up on social media, but I think that's the basic idea.
Or just listen to our Joker episode that we just had. I mean, we talked about it at the end, and you know, I voiced what I was hoping for or not hoping for, and you know, she has no desire to see it, which I get, especially after seeing the movie. Like, this is a very, very particular type of movie, so
yeah.
Let's
before we get into it, I just want to let the listener know real quick. So the way we're going to work this out, we're going to talk about the movie. We're going to give you our thoughts about the movie itself. As kind of a standalone, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how we think it compares to the Joker we know and love from the comics and other kinds of adaptations. And then we're going to sort of talk about, because I think some of you probably are interested in this part, some of the controversies surrounding it. We obviously can't get too far into that, but I just give you some sense about what we think about, like, what people are saying about the movie, I guess from both directions or from a number of directions. So that's what we're going to do.
Wait. Yeah. Who are we? I am Noah.
You don't know by now. You will never know me. My name is Jared. Okay, my name is Jared.
Okay. Hey, you never know. So this could be like the first episode somebody listens to, and
could be the first.
Sorry, go on. Whatever.
Well, no, that's fine. I was going to say, so I guess we can get into it, but what are your general thoughts about the movie? You do your general thoughts, I'll do my general thoughts, and then we can probably get into some nitty gritty in the bones and the meat.
Yeah, so as maybe some people know, or like I've posted on my personal account, or even as the podcast, I was cautiously excited for this movie. More because it's just from the trailer, it's different. You know, it's another new Joker. It's another new DC movie. And as a big DC fan, I'm always, I guess, cautiously excited for them because they have such a stigma or a stereotype for either being too dark or not good or this way or that way.
Stigmatite.
Yeah, stigmatite. So I was, you know, and also it's the Joker. So it's like we have so much on the Joker. It's like, well, how are they going to do it different? And boy, was this very different.
No question.
So I guess just to give my general thoughts on it, and just so the listener knows, of course this is going to be spoilery because it's a review, and we don't typically do non-spoiler things because if you're listening to this episode, you should be fully aware that we will tell you about it.
And at this point, for this episode, I mean, who cares about our non-spoiler review? Because it's so mixed out there. And the only thing that matters is why people think what they do at this point. Like the fact, you know, some people didn't like it, some people did. You just can't. There's no good consensus out there.
Yeah. So I thought the performances were amazing. I can see why people are, you know, the Oscar buzz is going and stuff like that. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix did a phenomenal job. I've never seen him act that way. I mean, you see him kind of as, I wouldn't say necessarily a dark character, but a conflicted character in, like, you know, movies like Walk the Line and stuff like that. So, I mean, you know, somebody really dealing with, their own mental state of mind. But this was just a completely different side of this actor that I would have never seen. And I think it's funny because I thought the same thing with Heath Ledger. And it's something about this character that really brings people's, different side of acting out, I guess. At least in the three people we've seen more in a contemporary sense, like Jared Leto, Heath Ledger, and now Joaquin Phoenix. But the movie I thought was very well done. I loved, absolutely. I'm a huge sucker for a good like movie score. And I thought the music in this movie was so well done. It was so simple at times, like just with the cello, especially in that moment where he's in the bathroom after had just first killing people, three people. First time he killed somebody, killed three people. And he ran to hide. And the cello that was playing during that part was it just fits so well.
Yeah, Noah was in band, if you can't tell.
Yeah, I was in band for like 10 years, so I love music. But no, I mean, I just think I didn't particularly, so looking at it in a comic book lens, I guess, I didn't like it. But I'm the type of, I love dramas and I love movies like that. I also don't like movies like Taxi Driver or Goodfellas and stuff like that. So it had it was very similar to those types of movies. And it just, I don't know, like for it to be the Joker, I was just like, oh, okay, well, I mean, if it didn't have them calling him Joker or it was set in Gotham or, the Waynes were in it, then it could have been a movie about anybody else. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
mean,
think that's true.
Yeah. So I think just as a comic book reader and expecting a little more Joker-ish stuff, or like even just the absence of Batman kind of left me like, well, I mean, yeah, it was an okay movie, I guess, in that aspect. But I guess I'll kind of wrap it up with my general opinions that I left the movie feeling bad. If that
that's fine.
Makes sense. Like, I don't know. Like, even like dark movies that I've seen, I've never, I don't know. I've just never felt bad after watching a movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
before I get into my general opinions, what made you feel bad? Just to clear up, did you mean that you're disappointed in the movie overall, or like the dark tone, or that because it wasn't the Joker you expected? Like, what actually do you feel like left you feeling bad?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a mix of all of that.
Sure. Yeah.
I think more because it is. I mean, it is a dark movie. I mean, it's about the Joker. I had no expectations that it wasn't going to be dark. I mean, the Joker is a fucked up character, and there's no reason to, actually like him, like empathize with him. You know what I mean? You shouldn't. You can't do that with the Joker. That's one of his whole shticks. But
I'm gonna disagree in the context of this movie. But we can get into that later because I do think it's an interesting part of the conversation.
Right. Well, and I think that's what I didn't like. So I guess to go more into it, I don't think they asked you to sympathize with him. I think they asked you to empathize with how he got to where he was, but to not apologize for his actions. And I liked that about the movie. I liked that they didn't do this whole like, yes, he's constantly getting beat up. Like anything possible you could think bad to happen to a person happened to him.
Yeah.
And so like that movie's just stuff like that's just going to naturally kind of make you feel bad or try to get you to sympathize with him a bit. But then the more it went on and the more you saw with him, like, yes, I did feel bad that, his, city funded, therapy sessions were getting cut. I did feel bad for that. And after that, shit started spiraling. But I think the movie did do a good job of like, okay, yes, he has had terrible things happen to him, but he's doing these things and you shouldn't feel bad that he's doing these things because they are terrible things. Like he started to enjoy them. So does that make sense? Like
it totally does. I think we're getting way ahead of ourselves though, just because like I feel like this is how we should feel about the Joker, generally speaking, like in terms of this movie and in terms of his origin. Like I think that's a sort of a discussion unto itself. I was going to say, I just want to tip my hat before we get into these sorts of details. I love this movie. I love it. I thought it was amazing. It's in my top 10 of comic book movies.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I mean, I think there's a lot to be said. Like, so I think let's talk about, like I said, the movie itself real quick, because I was going to say, I wanted to echo a sentiment you made. I think the acting is just superb in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Even from his mother, I can't remember her name. She's been in American Horror Story and a bunch of other things. Like she was really good in it.
She was fantastic.
Even Sophie, the girl that played Domino in Deadpool, she was. I mean, everybody, even though they had like very small parts, they were amazing. Like it's just so well done.
Those are really the four characters. There's some other characters here too, but the four characters that have. I wish sorry that we didn't IMDb before. I forgot to do that, but yeah, those are really the four sort of performances in this movie, which are the Joker, Robert De Niro's character, Murray Franklin. Mm-hmm. The sort of like TV comedian, like Jay Leno sort of character, and then his mother and what you think is his girlfriend. We can get into that in a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I think that's the one part of this movie nobody's really disputing, is that it was powerfully acted. I mean, can he not get nominated? Is that even possible?
No, he certainly can. Why would you think he couldn't?
No, I mean, is it even possible he wouldn't?
Oh, I mean, who knows? I think like the Oscars and all of that stuff, I mean, not to really get political and stuff, but I think it is very political driven a lot of the time. So who knows? We'll see. I mean, I would be surprised if no part of this movie got nominated, like even just cinematography. Like I think something from this movie should get nominated. So...
Yeah. Well, I honestly, and this is maybe the most dramatic statement I'm going to make in reference to this movie, in terms of the acting, I think it is a step above, and demonstrably, not just a matter of taste, though I think it's grounded in taste. I think he's better than Heath Ledger in this movie, which might seem dramatic, but I think it has a lot to do with the internal stuff that's going on with the character in a way that we don't have in Heath Ledger's performance, despite the fact that was amazing in itself. I loved Heath Ledger's Joker. I think, now is this, and I think this is a question, is this a better Joker? I don't know. In terms of a character that got created, I think what I love about this is that he actually is pretty conflicted for most of the movie. And I think that's, since we're talking about the Joker here, that's the difference, I think, between these two Jokers. The Joker we had before, was really fully formed. I mean, he's this crazy, chaotic sort of thing, but he's really confident and, single in his direction and without any doubt, and I think that's what's really compelling about that character. He just knows what he's going to do. He has a kind of, he understands his own sort of philosophy. Whereas in this, even in our final moment, which I think is this dramatic thing where he kills Robert De Niro's character, he's pretty like angry and sad, and there's still a lot there. I don't think that's the first moment that the Joker almost exists, even, after the painting and stuff. So anyway, that's just sort of my general feelings about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to compare Heath Ledger's Joker to this one.
I did it really well, I thought.
No. I mean, a lot of people are saying that, Joaquin Phoenix beat Heath Ledger. It's like, okay, well, one is more of the Joker, like comic book wise, than the other. Yeah. And then you have to also think like The Dark Knight was set in a particular type of universe. It was a superhero universe and stuff. So it's going to lose some of that. I mean, I guess it had more constraints on it, I would assume, than this one did. Because, it's not a movie just about Joker. It's about how far he can push Batman. Now, Batman's out of this, and it's him coming into, I guess, if you want to call this the Joker, then you can. But him coming into and kind of accepting his view of the world or not view of the world and stuff like that. I mean, I like them both equally as actors. I would say, I mean, Heath Ledger's still probably my favorite Joker. Just in a comic book sense. I'm like, I can see him being more of the Joker from the comics than I can of this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you made a good point. I mean, for most of the movie, I'd say until the good, 30 minutes at the end of the movie, like the last 30 minutes, he was really starting to find his footing and being a terrible person. But for most of the movie, he was very conflicted, which would make sense with somebody that is dealing with this massive amount of mental illness and being depressed and constantly getting knocked down.
Yeah, and like I think there's some disappointment that some fans had that they thought that he was going to get there quicker and we'd get more Joker,
Right.
Not just in terms of his his look or fully donning the persona, but just generally like being that wickedly funny sort of character. And that was not till really arguably the end, if at all. But on its own terms, I think it's really amazing.
He was in that clown makeup much more than I thought he would be in, because he had the job. So he was in clown makeup then, and then he put it on again in the middle, and then at the end he had it on the entire time. So I was like, geez, he's really had the makeup on for a lot of the movie, which I'm not complaining about, but yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I have to say, it was pretty interesting that he was a clown this whole time. I mean, you know what I mean? I didn't see that coming. I might have been able to piece it together from the trailers. I just didn't put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah.
And I also liked that he suffered from mental illness throughout this movie. Because I actually thought that, and we'll get more into this later, but like that really got lost in the pre-political conversation that took place. I didn't realize that he would be that in the movie. In other words, this whole thing got sort of talked about in the sort of moral sort of like back and forth about whether this is a good time. Sort of you forget, he's actually, a damaged person, not just in terms of, he's had a hard life, but he's a person who has that, like, what an interesting thing, like with the laughter, that he has this anxiety disorder.
I thought that was amazing. Like, if you're going to make it as realistic as possible, because that is actually a disorder. And as soon as you find that out, I was like, oh, that's amazing, because that's going to make people uncomfortable and make him more uncomfortable and then make him seem crazy, which it did. Yeah. And so I thought that touch was, I mean, it was awesome. I thought it was really well done.
Again, and not to keep comparing these, because I love Heath Ledger's Joker, but I will just say, when I saw The Dark Knight, I really thought that Nolan had reached the kind of limits of realism in the genre. And you could argue in this movie, they kind of really step outside of the genre, and it's no longer even really a superhero movie in any meaningful respect. Not just because he's bad, but I mean like that he's sort of barely in reference to the comic book character. But in terms of realism, I mean, I just think I was blown away. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it accounts really well for how a person, might really, if not become the Joker, at least become a dangerous, violent person that exists in this sort of like, grandiose and flamboyant way. And man, I mean, like this movie, I just thought was deeply engrossing. For something that's so slow, and a lot of it I attribute to Hakeem's performance or whatever. I was just.
Did you call him Hakeem?
I actually have no idea how to pronounce his name.
It's like walking.
Yeah, so that's what I've tried to move away from saying that, because it sounds like I'm literally saying Walking.
I mean, that's how it's. Yeah, I mean,
is
that's
that really?
How people
okay, well, that's fine then. Okay. But anyway, yeah. So Walking Phoenix, like, he's just captivating this entire time, and I think it's mostly explained by he's a great actor, but it's just believable the entire time. I don't need, at some level, this movie to me is just so well written and acted, and even I'll say edited, that I don't care that it's not about the Joker. I kind of forgot it was about the Joker and stopped caring for a lot.
Well, I think that's one of the problems I had. It's a very small problem. I mean, once you're settled into it for maybe the first 30 minutes, you're like, oh, okay. Like, I get that this is, like, I knew Batman wasn't going to be in it. I knew it wasn't going to be a superhero movie.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was just more different than I thought it would be. And I've said it before, and, I've been curious if Joker can function without Batman. He can in this instance, in this type of story.
Sure.
But as far as, the Joker we know, like from the comics or the animated show or whatever, I don't think he can. But that's only because it's like you have to have the Joker doing something, you know what I mean? Like to people and to get Batman's attention, as where Batman can function on his own with, whoever else is there. So I don't know. I mean, I think the more I've sat with this movie, the more I've appreciated it, because I still don't really like this movie, but from I don't know how to say it, like an artistic standpoint, or just a good movie, the way it's done and how well it was, like you said, edited and everything, it's hard not to like this movie because of those things.
Yeah, and I actually think context is really important here, especially context of genre, because the funny thing is that, I think you're absolutely right. There's a certain way that, like, if you take Joker away from Batman, I mean, in a dialectical sense, he kind of he's not a villain anymore in the strictest terms. He's not a super villain or a comic book villain. But what to me it shows is, if you take him away from that, at least it suggests this a little bit, the way it's an interesting story is it becomes way more like watching a documentary or documentarian, like kind of sort of like what do you call it? Like a fictionalization or something like that of like a serial killer movie.
I mean, that's what this movie essentially was.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's why I didn't necessarily, like, that's probably one of the big reasons on why I felt bad, because it was like, there was no protagonist. It was just a movie about, somebody increasingly getting worse. There's no like silver lining or anything like that. So I don't know. But
I want to be clear here. What I'm saying is that, like, there are plenty, that's a well-established kind of movie.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Like, there's plenty of movies that are just about, like, there was a documentary recently about Ted Bundy. I'm going to argue Ted Bundy's worse than the Joker. I don't know not just because he was a real person, but it was it was captivating. Now, no one had a problem with that on the basis that it didn't have a protagonist. Now, I agree with you that, like, this isn't that. But I just mean, I think that it can be interesting and captivating at that level.
Yeah, I just think it's going to take a minute for movies like this, and supposedly DC's thinking about more movies to do like this under like their black label and stuff. And I just think it's going to take a little bit of time, because, we're so used to Marvel. Even people that are DC fans, we're so used to like Marvel type movies where it's like, this is a superhero movie. Like this is how it works. There's the villain, there's the protagonist. This is what's happening. But with movies like this, where it just completely steps outside of the genre, it's like, wait a second. So this isn't a comic book movie, but it is? Yeah. So it's kind of crossing genres, and it's just, I just think it might take a minute for, I guess, people like me to get comfortable with it.
Well, I don't disagree. And to be fair to that point, I liked it when I watched it. I've liked it way more thinking more about it, and I can't wait to see it again on that note. So I do think there's something, this is a very dense movie.
I don't want to see it again.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't want to feel terrible again.
No, I totally get it. I wouldn't say I want to see it. I'm excited to see this because it made me feel so joyous and be mission radiant. I think it was, a kind of like conceptual and moody feast, and that's really cool. But before I do want to talk more about how this relates to the Joker generally and the comics and stuff. I wanted to ask you though, before we kind of get away from the kind of basics of the movie, the technical plot, was there anything about it that you didn't like, just from a kind of movie criticism standpoint?
In what way?
Well, like I said, was there any part of the script, part of the story? Again, not thinking so much about the larger implications for the Joker or like what kind of movie it was. I just mean like from any kind of technical level where,
so there is one problem I have, but it's more this is kind of based in the character, and I was kind of irritated that they did it. So throughout the movie, I think you see it maybe 2 times, 3 times or whatever, and then you really see it at the end. There was a weird shot where, I think it might have been in the beginning, I'm not sure, where you see Joker in that white padded room and he hits his head on the door.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, that was weird. Why did you show that? And then you see at the end, like he's in that room. So it begs the question of, is any of this real? Did any of this happen? So because
that's interesting.
Because the Joker is not a reliable narrator. He lies. Absolutely. And as you saw throughout the movie, his girlfriend, supposedly Sophie, that part to me, I was like, oh shit, I didn't expect that. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, I should have expected that. Because there's been so many times in this movie where you think it's one thing, but it actually was another thing. But you have to think, it's like, okay, is he telling all of this to the social worker at the end? Like, was this him just recounting it? Because, what's true and what's not. So I think from a technical standpoint, that irritates me a bit because
I'm not sure that happened before we get too far off on it. Maybe I just interpreted that completely differently. I thought that was actually a past tense thing.
Oh, him inside the...
Yeah, because are we sure about that? Because the reason I mention it is that he's doing an outpatient program, and so it would stand to reason he's been, hospitalized before. Yeah,
but did they say he was in... Okay, well, so that's a good point. But that's what I'm saying. So, like, the movie, the way it's structured, it's either... It could be like an Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind thing, where the entire movie you're seeing actually takes place after all of the stuff that happened. So this movie, it could be one way or another. And a good point, now that you brought that up, is the place he was at with the social worker, it did not look like Arkham. Arkham is not that clean, as you saw whenever he went to Arkham to find out about his mother. It's not that clean. It's not that bright. You know what I mean? So it could be either one. But what I'm saying is this movie kind of leaves some interpretation. So if it's this way... I don't like it when movies are like, it was all a dream. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, so what's true and what's not?
I mean, I definitely think there's some of that ambiguity. I don't think that it concludes that it was all a dream, but you may be right that it leaves it open that it could have been or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not saying all of it, but I'm saying, but since it's the Joker or this character and who he is, he's supposed to be unreliable. He's supposed to be a liar. That's what he is. I mean, that's what the Joker is. So it just leaves that kind of, he's a not trustworthy narrator. So.
Right. In other words, like, I don't know that this is going to get a sequel, and I don't know that its world exists really outside of what we've seen. So it becomes less important, like what did or didn't happen in that respect. But I mean, I agree. I think that like that only adds to this feeling of like you said, unreliability and lunacy and chaos and stuff like that.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's a type of storytelling I don't like because then it's like, okay, so what did I go through all this for? But like I said, it's the Joker. And he does that. That's kind of part of his character. You saw that in The Dark Knight too, where he tells all these people like 3 different origins or 3 different things on why he is the way he is. And he doesn't even remember why he got the way he is. It's just part of the Joker. So it's like, okay, I get it. That's what the Joker is. But then there's the part of me that, type of storytelling I don't like. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned the idea that his sort of quote unquote girlfriend wasn't real.
Right.
We find that out. That's a big reveal. I have to say, in a weird way, I find it a bit superfluous. Like, it's not bad. I thought it was interesting. It definitely worked on me. I don't know that we needed it, believe it or not. Yeah, I guess it does underscore the level of his psychosis, but I just sort of felt his activities and behaviors and picadillos and everything like that are so weird. We're already kind of convinced that he's crazy.
Well, I think the reason why they did that, because if you notice in the movie, whenever he starts spiraling or when things start getting worse, she's there. And like when his mother went into the hospital, he was there for his mother. And then shortly after that, he finds out at least, and by proxy, we find out that she wasn't real the whole time. This love that he was having, or because he was having a bad day, he had somebody to go to, wasn't real. And I feel like that was part of the thing that made him snap, because then shortly after that, he went to go smother his mother. So he's got to smother.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've mispresented what I was talking about. I actually don't like that he's psychotic. And this is sort of the point I was trying to get to. I feel like the idea is that he's psychopathic, and that he's become violent, and he's, probably would have been diagnosed antisocial personality disorder. When the idea is that he's not in touch with reality, I actually think it weakens the character. One, I mean, there are some really rich, though I think unanswered, moral questions here, and questions about how a person becomes what they are. The idea that he's had a kind of psychotic break, he loses a kind of responsibility. In other words, a person that just doesn't have the capacity to distinguish the difference between what's real and not is in a lot of ways not a moral agent anymore. I mean, they're certainly dangerous and they could be compelling or something like that. And like my point, I guess, was that we were already there. So this feels a little bit like gilding the lily. It feels
I think he did get off his medicine and he didn't have that therapist to talk to anymore.
Yeah.
So we don't know how big of a part that medicine was playing in keeping him, quote unquote, sane. So maybe not being on that medicine and then having that terrible therapist to talk to was an agent to help push him over the edge, and that's what made him spiral.
You make a good point. I don't mean it's a logical problem. It's not. It's not incoherent. It totally makes sense in that way, and it's not random, like you said, because we have this sort of the idea that he's on medication and things like that. I only mean I think it actually weakens the movie in terms of like how compelling it is in a sense, and what the implications are. But so I thought and it's probably, this movie does have a tendency to drag on a bit. But
personally.
Yeah.
Personally, the moments where people were saying it dragged or like with him dancing in the bathroom and stuff, those were my favorite part of the movies.
Good. That's a good point.
The slow parts of the movie are the parts that I actually liked the most, because it's one of those things where you're seeing the process of how this character is dealing with these things or what's going to happen, or their just internal thoughts, but they're more shown instead of said. So I love that type of, cinematography or storytelling. So I thought those parts for me were amazing. I love those parts.
Yeah, and actually I think that reflects a thing and a real weakness and a sloppiness that goes into film criticism, which is that, like you mentioned, you like the slow parts. And there's a tendency when there are some really subjective features of movies that film critics then will talk about as if they're objective features. This is a great example. Pacing. Some people like a slow burn. Some people enjoy that, relishing in that. And you can't really argue it's bad or good. While you might want it to hurry up and be more economical, another person might love that it like stays in certain kinds of scenes in a poetic sense. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to really talk shit about Americans, but kind of, and I'm not saying I'm better than most Americans, but one of the most recent examples I could think of, the OA, it's a show on Netflix. It's so weird. It's so beautifully done. And it's such a slow burn that the show wasn't doing well because it couldn't keep audiences in their seats to get the story. Yeah. So they ended up having to cancel it. And a lot of movies like The Witch is a big slow burn. Like, something crazy happens at the beginning, but then it's just building to this entire thing to the end. And it didn't do well enough because people don't like that kind of thing. And I just, like I said in the beginning, I just feel like movies like this are for a very particular type of audiences. Sure. And it tends to be, a lot of Americans and stuff like that. Like, they like something quick. They want it now. They want, big explosions. Let me know the answers now. So
that being said, and I think we can kind of transition to some other sort of subjects a little bit through this, but it's actually doing really well, this movie, and it's doing really well with audiences. Which is interesting because I think, and that doesn't, I mean, people can be wrong in massive numbers, so it's not to say that's just, that means it's automatically good. But what's interesting to me is that most of the criticism that I've heard about this movie doesn't exist in reference to the movie itself. They're for one of two things: either sort of comic, investments that people have, certain commitments to what they wanted the character to be like, stuff like that. In other words, certain expectations. Those are fair, and I'm actually relatively sympathetic to them for my own nerd perspective. And then political arguments, which we'll touch on a little bit later, which to me register as really sort of vacuous and a little bit more, I don't know, internet politics kind of stuff. But yeah, so I think it's interesting and suggests the ability, the competence and compelling nature of this film. That even though it's slow in the way that you're talking about, American audiences for the most part, like I think Rotten Tomatoes has it at 68% with critics, but like 90% with people that watched it. So there's enough just drama and tension and violence that I think it really does work for most casual observers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that. I mean, this movie essentially has the perfect marketing machine because it has DC, Warner Brothers, so they automatically have all that in that pool. They have the Batman pool, they have the comic book community pool, and then you have the artsy kind of drama, taxi driver people, and then you have the people that are hearing all this stuff, hearing all the politics, hearing all the controversy, and it's just constantly, it's just been circulating. I can't open anything on the internet without seeing something about this movie, and it's just drawing people in. And I think that people were hesitant at first, or like, I'll see it later. And then people were coming out of the theater saying, this is amazing, this is the best movie of the year, even over, Endgame and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, let me go see this movie. So it's just increasing. It's being increasingly consumed because everybody wants to be in the know. So I just think it has this perfect storm of marketing and, the name.
Well, the thing about a movie like this too is it's small enough and coherent enough that it can kind of be a normal sort of like art film in a sense, in that it has a basic concept that it sort of goes through a basic direction. It has theme. It has sort of literary conceit. Endgame is this massive, like, I don't know. And I'm not just that movie, but movies like that, generally superhero movies, it's this connected world. It's more like
it's a superhero movie.
Yeah, exactly. But moreover, I mean, like, there are movies that, like, I think this, in terms of other superhero movies, is way more like Logan than something like Endgame. Endgame is this amusement park ride that connects all these different worlds, sort of like the last Harry Potter movie or something like that. And it's just a little bit different. And if anything, there's been a lot of criticism against this Joker movie that's been, just, you can tell it's just due to superhero fatigue. They're just tired of things that have anything to do with superheroes. And I want to be like, and is there something else to say about the movie? This is way more like a Scorsese movie, than it is any other superhero movie, with the exception, like I said, I think of Logan.
I just think, like, for me personally, being in the comic book community and stuff, I just think the Joker himself, I have Joker fatigue, and I'm verging on Harley Quinn fatigue, because it's like, yes, I love these characters, I love the properties and everything, but can we please have something else? Like, it's just, I think that's what Kayla and I were kind of touching on, and our Joker deep dive was like, look, it's not that we don't love this character or anything, but it's like, you could have made a bunch of other movies. And I know that sounds like whining and stuff, but it is possible. I mean, if they're able to completely disconnect themselves from whatever connected mess they were trying to make and make the Joker movie, it's like, well, then there's no reason to believe you can't make one about Lobo or one about Vandal Savage and stuff like that. So it's like, you could touch other audiences, and I think this movie proves it, with making something about the character and not concerned with this big connected universe. And if you did want to connect them later, you could. But I just think that this movie is in the step of the right direction for what comic book movies can be and what they also can't be. So...
Yeah, I don't disagree totally with the two of you. I think to me, I mean, it's a bit overstated that, like, we've just had too much Joker. Only in the idea that, I mean, I agree that if there was a character that is overused or overexposed, so to speak, Joker's up there. The thing is that comic books are always going to have popular characters. There's always going to be some character out there that there's tremendous amount of demand for, and then oversaturates. Wolverine's been that, Spider-Man's been that, Deadpool's been that, Superman and Batman, I think, have really, their oversaturation has drenched, I think, DC in a way that doesn't happen a lot. So, I mean, totally get that.
I just think that what Marvel proved was that, okay, even if you don't make like a very thought-provoking movie like the Joker, but you put characters front and center that aren't, Superman or Batman, that you can make something of it. So I mean, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, these characters were nobody, at least to like most people. And then once this came out and they made movies and they spent time with these characters, they've gotten up there with Superman and Batman. So I think that's the only grievance that like not even just Kayla and I, but a lot of people do have. It's like, okay, like what's next? If it's going to be another Harley Quinn movie, why? So like,
yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir on that. I will say that if they were going to make one, if it's okay to make a Joker movie, then I think they did a good job here.
Yeah,
I'm curious, just in reference to the comics, because we haven't gotten into that maybe as much as we should have thus far. So I think what's good about this movie is that, in a sense, it did, I put on quotes, need to be made. The reason I mention this is that a lot of times people are like, oh, we've already had a Joker movie, or we've already had so many Jokers. The reason I say it's not, it's not superfluous, it's not extraneous. This is new. Yeah. I will say, like, this is, and I'm curious from your perspective, in what way do you think this is a good Joker in terms of like your idea of the concept? In what ways do you think this is goes in a direction that you don't like with the Joker? How do you compare this to your general concept of the Joker, I guess?
I think so. I couldn't really form it into words. I don't think this is the Joker. This isn't like, I mean, reading the comics for years and like being so consumed with this and having it shoved down our throats. I didn't feel like this was a Joker. Maybe it was because Batman wasn't involved or anything else, and it wasn't really a superhero movie or comic book movie. But I think Todd Phillips recently came out and was like, well, this Joker could have been the inspiration for Batman's nemesis. Now, with that, I think if that was true or whatever he was trying to do, I think that waters down Batman's Joker quite a bit, that he kind of stole somebody else's persona to be who he was, or gave some weird type of excuse for that. Now, but I think that's a good explanation for what this Joker is. That it's not Batman's Joker, but this could have been something that happened and then inspired somebody else, which you saw in the movie at the end, where all these people were taking on the persona of the Joker, or being, what they thought was a symbol for, the poor people or the people that aren't the Waynes, and acting upon that. I could see that. But I don't feel like, this isn't the Joker. If you're looking for Batman's Joker, you're not going to find it here. Yes, he's murderous and he's crazy and he's unpredictable, but I think that's as far as the comparisons can go, at least for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it too, because actually what gets really annoying about certain kind of fans and certain perspectives on this kind of stuff is always thinking any interpretation or instantiation is trying to be the definitive one. And right. I think, if this was just Joker from now on for me, I would be as upset as any nerd critic. I don't see this as the definitive Joker. I don't think it's scalable, so to speak, in terms of comic books. Like it would really make a mess if every time I read a Batman comic that Joker featured in, this was the new Joker. I will say, I wonder if this is going to affect comic writing a little bit, because sometimes that has a tendency to happen. But I looked at this way more like a Red Sun Superman, or an Injustice Superman, or something like that.
So they did say this is essentially like their Elseworlds. This is just stories within the properties of this company, which it's like, okay, that's fine. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't have to take this to heart. Like, this isn't going to be our Joker from now on. But you do make a good point that I don't know how this Joker could function in a Batman comic. I mean, it could if it was very much like a murder mystery type thing.
People couldn't enjoy it. I mean,
because
what the interesting thing for me, as it relates to the comic book, and the indictment here against certain kinds of comic book fans is, look, you love the villains, but you don't know the villains, and you're talking about a cartoon. I mean, and I think what's interesting about this Joker is, how do you get a Joker, right? well, you need these conditions to make the Joker. And it's like, we love this flamboyant, devious, gun-wielding maniac insofar as he's this, flamboyant cartoon. You put a dash of realism, which in a sense, I think I take this to be not much more than really a dash of realism, and it's an absolutely horrifying thing,
Yeah.
And it's, to me, a good example is like the Red Skull, which is like, it's like you kind of forget, oh yeah, the Holocaust. It's like, yeah, it's like, it's a Nazi and that's fun in the sense that he's so evil, like in an Indiana Jones way.
Did you just use Nazi and fun in the same sentence?
Meaning, if you ever seen the Indiana Jones, most people would describe that movie as fun.
I'm just fucking with you.
But that's what I mean. Like, it's, so I think in a similar way, it's like, this movie takes itself really seriously in the right ways, and the effect is it gets dark very quickly.
Yeah, I mean that's what this is. I mean, you put it. I think we both. I mean, it's Taxi Driver meets Goodfellas. It's a Scorsese film. Like, that's what you're gonna get. I mean, I think that's why I said I was cautiously excited, because I'm like, I don't know what to expect from this. Like, it doesn't look like anything I've seen before in any of the Jokers, really. Obviously, more Heath Ledger's type of Joker, but after seeing it, I'm like, I don't know what this means for comic book movies. I hope it means a good thing, that they'll let creators and directors and all of those people have more freedom to tell the type of stories they want to.
Sure. That
would be great. I would love that. I don't want the same type of movie with a different character in it. I want different types of movies with the different types of characters. I think almost anybody can agree with that, especially as comic book readers. We read particular types of characters because we like what they're about. We like the type of stories they are. I mean, you read a Batman comic, and more often than not, you'll get a type of detective story, or you'll get a mystery story most of the time, or at least if you really dig. And then, you read like a Wonder Woman comic, and you'll get a lot of bloodline type stuff, and you'll get a lot of God stuff. So, I mean, I hope this is a wake-up call to not even just DC, but Marvel as well, to just kind of branch out a bit, step outside the box.
I'm glad you say that, and I think that's what you really need, people to have the freedom also to have their own version of a character. And it's like, it's easy, and I'm speaking from a person who's been disappointed myself. I'll kind of explain that, but like, I know a lot of people, this isn't their Joker. And I think that's fair, and it's also fair to be like, you don't always get your Joker. And the reason I say this is that, like, as a Thor fan, recently
you've gotten everything you've wanted from Thor, so don't even.
No, I actually completely disagree, and I think
I
was going to say, but okay, so what I'm trying to go for here is that, like, in the comics, Thor is a woman, or was made a woman for a while, and then also in the movies, Thor becomes this like fat drunk, and the reason I mention this is that people were very quick who aren't Thor fans to sort of be like, that's not your Thor, but it's a Thor I like. It's a new Thor. It's a Thor for a new generation and everything like that. And, if you're attached to that old character, that can be kind of difficult as a nerd to kind of cope with. And the reason I mention it now is that there are so many Batman fans and Joker fans who are pissed about this movie. And I want to be like, yeah, see, they didn't even change the character. They just made him a slightly different kind of psychopath. And those people like, this isn't my Joker. And here's the point I'm trying to make is, it's sort of like, how you feel about them deviating from your character is often how attached you to that character. And, it's like, I want to be, this helps me grow as my own kind of nerd to be like, okay, relax a little bit on your Thor stuff, because, every character gets open to new interpretation.
Yeah. I mean, I think the good thing about this movie is that, even though, me being a big Batman fan and pretty well versed in the mythos and everything, I wasn't super upset that this wasn't my Joker. And I think I've been seeing that a lot more recently, that where people are like, well, this isn't Joker, but it's a good movie. So I think that they have the right ingredients to leave some interpretation, or let people just accept it a little bit, and then they might find that they have a good movie. I don't like the movie totally, but I get why people can be upset. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's so weird. It's so weird as being a comic book reader or just being in these types of fandoms or whatever, where we read something that changes all the time. I mean, not even just the characters, but the artists and the writers. Like, but yet this community gets so upset with changes. I just think it's so funny. I'm to blame for this too. Like, I get really upset when they change something, but it's like, wait, I'm reading something that they'll probably just retcon this, or this character won't even exist in the next 3 months, or, so I just think, I think it's really funny that still now, even with all these comic book movies, people are still upset about change. It's all of Marvel's characters are hardly what their characters are in the comics. Yeah. I mean, now if you read their comics, they've interpreted them from the movies, but that's not how they were. I mean, even if you just want to look at their powers, a lot of their powers even change. So, yeah, I don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. Neither one is ever going to be
satisfied.
Well, it's not. Neither one's ever going to encompass, the entire truth in this way, which is that, you can't just be against all change in comic books. But the other is true too, which is that there are some changes that are made that are, I think, poor ones, or poorly thought out, or cynical, or poorly written, or have, or poorly executed. So, it's like, I don't think every criticism of a certain kind of change with a character or adaptation is completely valueless or vacuous. Some of it's just good, criticism. And then on the other end, I don't think any time they interpret a character differently, that's some grave sin. So it's always going to have to just be a kind of conversation.
I think we should get into the politics and what people are saying.
Well, one thing I always feel like when it comes to this kind of stuff is, no offense, but I'll be a bit offensive here. If you're going to be political, and I don't mean you being on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube as just a person, I mean these larger critics that I'm reading and, connected to Rotten Tomatoes, is that you should read more about politics. I am really getting tired of sort of amateurs lecturing about politics. And I don't mean just not having a background. I just mean like very cheaply in a very knee-jerk way, things like that. And the reason
I think it's... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The reason I mention this is that this got picked up on both sides by people that had a, iron in the political fire well before they had any sense about what the movie was like. Or even particularly critical about the movie. In other words, they didn't seem to know anything about what it was about or what it's said before having a very strong opinion. And at that point, it's like you're committed to liking this movie or not liking it, not based on the movie in its reality, but based on where you need to be in reference to your sort of online politics. And I just think that's really cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I agree mostly with that. I mean, I've seen, before the movie even came out, there was a lot of strong political opinions. Like, this is going to cause, how dare you do this to, the victims of the Aurora shooting and all this stuff. It's like, okay, I'm not saying that their concerns or that the way they feel is invalid, but these people from these major news networks or, whoever, these Twitter warriors or whatever that pick that up and are advocating for, this is going to incite this is going to incite that. It's like, okay, well, one, the movie hasn't come out, and you haven't said anything about the movie aside from what it could do. So you're causing all this political turmoil and causing this conversation, and I think it's pretty disingenuous to do that for something, one, before you even know, two, before you even know what the character is. Like, I mean, I read one where somebody was like, oh, in the Killing Joke book, they did this. It's like, well, what does that have to do with this movie? Like, yeah, this is the character, but you're talking that because something that happened in a comic book and this character is based on that this is going to happen. That doesn't really work that way. But then you've even seen now where, if something remotely is like a disturbance in the movie theater with this movie, it's a news story. Like there was one where it was these guys got kicked out of a Joker screening for causing a disturbance and smoking. It's like, what? I'm pretty sure there's tons of movie theaters where people are causing a disturbance or smoking. Why is this a story? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and speaking of story, I think what bothers me about the way that this got taken up in, the kind of like BuzzFeed Vice, again, and I'm not being partisan here. I happen to be on the left generally, but like just in this really cheap way, is they're just press whores. They're just press hounds. Like, in other words, they have some, and when I say them, I mean different bloggers, different people who have like some clout on social media. They just have some presence and some vague, political sort of impressions they're trying to get out. And they saw this as a thing to kind of, it's basically as fodder or ammunition to make those points. I'll give a good example to be more specific. This is not an incel anthem or celebration of inceldom. And might I say, are we debating whether incels are liked or popular? I don't understand this at all. This is like an argument that there's no one on the other side of. Are there people on the right that are like, yeah, incels are great? I just didn't understand how they were trying to connect. This at all.
I haven't really looked too much into that. The only thing that I personally kind of see problematic with this movie, and it's kind of hard because this movie is it's about a bad person. Like, bad things happen in this movie. So, but I had this weird kind of thought, or, what does it mean? What's the type of message are they trying to send? Is there a message even to begin with? You know what I mean? But it's the fact that, this person, which seems happy for kind of the most part, or normal, if you can say, for the beginning of the movie. And then he starts getting beat up, and you start finding more about his life, and he's off his medication and everything. And then he's given a gun. And then this person that happens to be, mentally unstable and, has mental illness, has a gun, and he uses this gun to obviously protect himself, which, that's fine. People should have the right to do that. But the more he does it and the more he sees the power that this gun has, I feel like it's him kind of making an excuse for his actions. That's him, the character. I'm not saying necessarily writers, but it was a weird thing to see. It's like, okay, so you gave this, mentally ill person a gun. They see the power it has and they can fix their problems this way. So there was no, I guess, lesson to be learned from that. Does that make sense? Like, I felt like that was probably the most problematic thing in this current political climate. Like, I just recently, my little brother, he got 2 threats at his school for mass shootings. And, more often than not, some of these people are mentally ill, or there has been, mentally ill people that have used guns and stuff. So it was just a weird, I don't know, in this current political climate, it's like, is this something we needed? Because it's not like this happened and we're over it. It's currently happening. And I think Caleb brought up a funny point. She's like, I mean, if you want to see something about a sad white guy killing people, just turn on the news. It's like, well, I mean, I guess that's kind of true. But
but it's the point is a sort of like self, dissolving, I think, because not her entire perspective, but just framed that way, which is, that's exactly the kind of movies we should make. Which is, or at least some of them. I mean, some movies have to be allowed to be about, contemporary social problems.
Right, but usually how these are structured, or, I guess that you want them structured is to show some type of consequence, or to show, something on don't do this. You know what I mean? So, I just had a thought, and somebody had said it too, where it's like, well, what if somebody that was struggling the same way this guy is saw it and was like, oh, if I get a gun, I can fix my problems and take care of the people that are causing me problems. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not saying like this is what that movie's doing, but I don't know. It's something to talk about, I guess. Yeah,
and what I'm saying, this stuff is addressable. So it's like, these aren't just like kind of questions to pose. I think they're questions you can kind of bring to bear some comparisons. I heard a critic say, I don't want to steal this point, I think it was a good one, that Deadpool is far more violent than this movie. And as a matter of fact, you could argue there are many things that because they have this veneer of, like a fun romp, we accept. Whereas, so for instance, look at how Deadpool kills people. Now, you can have this simple sort of moralistic notion like, well, he kills bad guys. But the point is that violence in the Deadpool movies I love, by the way, are treated for laughs with complete cartoonishness, completely devoid of moral weight or something like that. Whereas with this movie, they're murders and they're looked at with a really grisly reality. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I think that's the distinction that if my brother was to see, so my 10-year-old brother, if he saw Deadpool and like he laughed at some of the stuff, but he didn't care about it. Yes, it's violent and, obviously not, but the way he's doing it, the reason he's doing it, and it's just, you could tell it's not real. But I think setting it in reality and making it more realistic is what would worry people. And I can see that. This isn't somebody that has superpowers and they're fighting against bad guys. It's somebody that's sad and deeply ill, and he's given the power to counteract that with violence. So I am not saying that this could incite violence. I'm just saying I think it's something to be brought up, and is probably one of the negative things for me about this movie, because there's no repercussions. Like the more he's doing this, the more happy he seems, and he gets caught by the cops, but then he gets out of that. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying maybe some of the points are valid and some of the concerns of what people were saying.
I definitely think the concerns are valid. Like, so people that are worried that somebody could see this movie and then be influenced by it in a negative way, I would certainly worry about it. But I would worry about a lot of violent movies like that. And I'll even I take your point that this is particularly realistic, and maybe that there's a special danger there. But I don't think that I don't think that it's a tenable position to say, well, we can't realistically depict violence in art.
Sure. I wouldn't want them to censor that.
No, well, I know, and actually, there's a sort of thing, a lurking sort of predisposition people have about this kind of stuff. Because what I've heard a lot is it's like it's rationalizing his behavior. It's trying to have us sympathize with this evil person.
Yeah, I don't think that.
Yeah, well, no, I know you don't, but I've heard this a lot.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah.
But to make my point, there's this feeling like, well, to them, morality is just this weird mystery religion. Like, if this movie has a point, I think it's at least, because it's very open-ended, but it's at least that social conditions and political conditions actually lead to moral outcomes.
I will say, while you just brought up the social thing, it was something I thought about with the movie. I did like that he wasn't particularly part of the movement. He did like that happened and it was inspired by him, but I thought I feel like you didn't get enough of that. I feel like you didn't get enough of the classist stuff to really see a lot of it. Does that make sense? Like, I mean, you saw great point. But go ahead, because I actually think that's exactly the thing to mention. Go ahead, finish. No, go ahead. I mean, that's essentially all I was going to say.
Well, so what I think is actually super smart about the construction of this is he isn't aware of necessarily what the movie might be suggesting about the situation. So, and I think I've heard critics sort of really kind of dimly miss this point. At the end, the climax of the movie with Robert De Niro, right before he shoots him, he's like, "I'm not political."
He says he doesn't believe in anything.
Exactly. So let me make this point that he's not agenda driven, but that doesn't mean that the movie itself isn't making a kind of political point about the consequences. So the fact that he hasn't taken up some manifesto esque sort of articulated agenda, I think doesn't mean that the filmmaker isn't suggesting, look, when you have certain social conditions on the ground, poverty, violence, no healthcare system that meaningfully takes people's mental illness, you have some crop of the population that, because of their, sort of like personal psychological problems, not to mention the gun. You mentioned this earlier. The gun is he's giving it to him, by some guy that doesn't even like him. That's going to lead to certain violent outcomes. The fact that the Joker's unaware or unconcerned with that because he's actually going through the sort of violent psychosis, I think, doesn't take away from the political weight that the film kind of has.
Well, I think he does. I mean, not to say you're wrong or anything like that, because I'm
Heaven
not.
forbid.
Yeah, but I do think that he did realize some of the stuff was happening because there's a good point in the movie where he was saying something along the lines of like, I never thought I was real or didn't exist, and now people are noticing. So they constructed the movie in a weird way where it's like he could either be talking about people dressing like him and like, using him as a symbol, or that because he has the power now to kill people, people are now noticing. And it could be both. So I think it's interesting. Like, the best thing about this movie is it is thought provoking. It doesn't give you everything on a silver platter. It's not a movie where it's like, this is how it works and here's its timeline. It's very straight. It's not like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, the other thing, like I said, is that this really sort of binary idea where we either like, if somebody does something villainous in a movie, we either have to like sort of their origin has to be mysterious, or we're endorsing their activity, is really just a childish attitude to have. Yeah. In other words, if understanding what makes people bad is the same thing as saying they're not bad, what we're relegated to saying is we can't understand how things become what they are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a problem. I think that, people ought to sort of like consider that when they're looking at a movie where you're just manifestly seeing the, like, I hate to use the cliche, but origins of evil. Mm-hmm. And if that's untenable, I don't know. It's like, how do you read a fucking psychology textbook?
Yeah,
I mean, is that really like?
I wouldn't want to, but yeah.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Do they read psychology textbooks and say, "Oh, murder," and they're explaining that it's genetic components and it's linked to trauma? Oh man, they must love murder. It's just kind of silly attitude to take up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, depending on what they're saying and where they're coming from, I think all sides could have a valid point.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
I just think, do you. If you don't like it, it's not your thing. Perfectly fine. It's not really my thing. I know this whole episode, I'm pretty sure if Kayla listens to this, she's going to be real confused, because for most of this episode, it sounds that I really enjoyed this movie. I didn't, but I like this conversation. I like, it's starting a conversation with people, not even just about comic book stuff, but about a lot of other things. And that's what art is supposed to be. I mean, movies are art, and this is a type of thing where it's going to cause conversations, good or bad. And, some people are going to take advantage of that. But, I think it's a thought-provoking thing. I would never see this movie again, but I appreciate what it was trying to do, I guess. But just the execution just wasn't for me.
And I have to say, I think it moves the flag. I don't know the metaphor. It moves the like flag a little further down the field or whatever. In other words, like it I think is a different kind of comic movie. I haven't seen this before, and I think it expands the options that are out there, and I think it invites a certain kind of gritty realism we hadn't really seen that much in comics movies. So I was at least glad that it sort of expanded, genre that much more.
Yeah. I mean, so I think we should end this episode with rating it. I don't even know what to rate it on. We usually do like tridents or like depending on what the movie is.
Let's say like, how many hyenas? I don't know.
No, there was no hyenas in this movie.
That's which is a weakness.
Okay, I mean, we'll just rate it out of clowns, I guess. Whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give this a 5 out of 10.
That's to me crazy. Your rating is insane.
Well,
this is only crazier than the Joker.
This is only from an artistic standpoint. As far as like the actual story and everything, I'm not. It's not for me. I'm not here for it.
Sure. well, I'm sure that you'll be welcomed into I just have to hang out with the incels. Well, Noah gets to hang out with the cool people. That's fine.
Are you gonna rate it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 10, or
Jesus.
a 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10.
I mean, give it a 10 if you want to give it a 10.
Well, no, I mean that's not. I'm not holding back with that. There are actually a few flaws. One I didn't talk about just real briefly. I was going to say the Scorsese thing is a little bit much. That's the one I will say, and I also have heard people say this before. The one thing that keeps it from being a 10 for me is that like it is real similar to Taxi Driver, and Robert De Niro's in it, so I know that's conscious. Like, they're not ripping off Taxi Driver.
Well, Todd Phillips himself said he got inspiration from Taxi Driver, so...
But it's, like, too close to me.
And I don't like that movie, so, I mean, it makes sense that I wouldn't like this one either. I should have known.
But, I mean, outside of that, like, I loved watching this. I think it's really interesting. I hope he gets the Oscar. It's amazing.
Okay, well, that's it for this week, guys. So, thanks, guys. This is weird saying it without Kayla. Okay.
Hold on. Oh, no, Kayla's here. Thanks, guys. That's her. She says that. So,
thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.